Today, TCU offensive line coach A.J. Ricker had some interesting comments about Kendall Briles' offense and the differences between what they are doing now as opposed to what they were doing under Garrett Riley. How is this offensive line coming along? And then 3 TCU players made Bruce Feldman's yearly freaks list as some of the best athletes in college football. We'll discuss that and more next on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us wherever it is you get your podcast on audio, in its audio variety. I'm on social media, mainly on Twitter, or X, I believe is what it's called now, but my handle is @SimcockSteven. The show is @LockedOnTCU. And today, after practice, A.J. Ricker, the offensive line coach, spoke with the media. And we haven't talked a ton about this offensive line this year, but to set the stage, I mean, they're replacing a lot, right? Steve Avila in the NFL right now with the Los Angeles Rams. Alan Ali, undrafted free agent with the Minnesota Vikings. Wes Harris, played a ton of snaps last year and played a lot of college football, was on the team for 6 seasons, was one of those guys that benefited from the extra COVID eligibility and had a ton of experience, was finally able to stay healthy last season and really stepped up in a big way. So that interior offensive line is changing, right? And then you got Andrew Coker and Brandon Coleman, your tackles coming back. An interesting note on Coleman later on in the show and what he might be doing this season, transitioning a little bit. But something else stood out to me that we're going to discuss here in segment 1 from A.J. Ricker's comments, and it was his description and sort of his thoughts on what they were doing offensively this season under Kendall Briles as opposed to what they've done in the past with Garrett Riley, or the past, being the one season he was on staff here. And so Jeremy Clark asked him about some of the differences. Are there major differences up front? And he basically said yes. And it was kind of hard to tell, was he just talking about the verbiage? He's definitely talking about the verbiage. That's one thing that's changing. Play calls are different. So that's going to be a huge part of this. But also, he mentioned that, they're running a completely different offense. Obviously, some of the concepts are similar, but this is a totally different system that they'll be implementing this year. And so he said he thought that was good because it's easy to get stale and just sort of get bogged down in what worked in the previous season. Now you're bringing in a fresh perspective. You're bringing in a fresh system. And then Brian Estridge asked him about tempo and keeping his O-line in shape. Are they going to be able to do this at a high level? And he said that, it's something they're working on, but he sees a ton of benefits to, playing fast, running tempo, getting up to the line of scrimmage, and getting it done. But he said tempo is the key to the offense, which I found fascinating. Now, he might just be specifically talking about the offensive line, but this is one of those things when we talked to Doug Fairley from the Coordinator Project, who did a really nice job breaking down, okay, here are the different things that Kendall Briles does on offense. He's sort of changed a lot in his philosophy and his system, or at least what he was doing at Arkansas was very different than what he was doing early in his career at places like Baylor and Houston and Florida Atlantic. And he didn't use a ton of tempo at Arkansas. And, I would imagine some of that was Sam Pittman said, hey, we don't want this to be, a team that where we're snapping the ball every 13 to 15 seconds, right? And I think going at a fast pace and running a hurry-up offense, sometimes it obviously puts pressure on a defense, right? It doesn't always allow the defense to sub. It doesn't allow the defense to necessarily mix up coverages and mix up looks because there's so much pressure on, okay, we just got to get lined up right, understand our assignments, and have everybody on the same page before the ball snapped. It's not like a magic elixir in creating an outstanding offense. It's not like it was 10 years ago. And even then, I saw some offenses that are running fast tempos that frankly weren't doing it well. You still have to execute. You still have to make plays. You still have to find ways to outsmart the defense. It's not as simple as just going at a fast pace. If it was, everybody would do it. But we've seen this shift in college football, and we've sort of gotten away from I remember when Chip Kelly's with the Eagles, right? Like they had on the broadcast of the Eagles games, they would have the clock that showed how fast the Eagles were snapping the football. And they were going at this record-setting pace, and it was very strange at the time for the NFL because there were still a lot of NFL coaches that hadn't embraced some of the spread concepts that college football had embraced. And Chip Kelly was successful for a while, and then things kind of got stale, and it didn't end up working for him in Philadelphia, and he returned to college football. You don't see as much of that now. I think teams understand the need for balance, and just because you're going at a fast tempo doesn't mean you're going to have a great offense, right? I think even TCU sort of figured that out in 2016, definitely, but even at times in 2015, that if you're scoring quickly, that can put pressure on your defense. And if you're going 3 and out and having short possessions, then you're putting your defense immediately back on the field, and that can be an issue. However, if you do it well and if you execute it well, then it can be a huge factor within the game. And he discussed, like, if the O-line's in shape and they understand the need to be in good condition, have energy, have that ability to keep running at this pace in the fourth quarter, then you could see defensive lines with their hands on their hips so I can win late in the game. And that makes it easier on the O-line if you're trying to get push, whether that's trying to, pass protect and give your QB time to make plays, or if you're trying to shove people off the ball. And this is sort of one of the big X factors to me, is what is it actually going to look like when they hit the field against Colorado and beyond? Are you going to see, a mix of what Kendall Browse was doing at Arkansas and what he's done in different stops? Are you going to see a more run-dominated offense that runs more traditional sets and still tries to take advantage of RPOs and uses the quarterback in the run game? He's obviously going to adjust this and suit this to TCU's personnel. But if you can pick and choose your spots with that hurry-up offense, they can be effective. And they did that last year. I mean, there were times where they were running at a really fast pace. And so much of it is getting that first down, right? Like once you start moving the chains, then you can put the defense on their heels by getting them to the line quickly, getting your hand on the ground, firing off the football, and making it happen. And this is an offense that's still going to run the football. And like even back in the early days when he was with Baylor, Kendall Browse ran the football, but it was so much more about manipulating the defense by creating situations where there's limited people in the box, using all the field space with those wide receiver splits that you create to your advantage with the athleticism you have in the backfield. And at Arkansas, you saw a lot more of like lead back blocking, fullback guys in an offset eye, H-backs that were firing off the ball, a lot more using your tight end. And so we won't know until the game starts. But that's one of the first times I've really heard anybody on the coaching staff say, yeah, we're planning on using tempo. Don't know if it's going to be all the time. And it doesn't mean that it's some, magical thing that's going to make this offense on its own incredible. But if you can pick and choose when to use it, then it can be effective. And he also talked about finishing drives, right? Like learning if you're able to string 8 or 9 plays together and you're going at a pretty good clip and keeping the defense on their heels, then the key is how do you finish those drives? How do you find a way to get in the end zone? Because field goals, not bad, but they can catch up to you if you can't find a way to score 6 when you're in the red zone. And obviously you want to get points every time that you get on the plus side of the field. That's not going to happen, but that has to be the goal. And so those were his comments about this offense. When we come back, we'll talk more about the offensive line. What are they doing? What ideas do they have to sort of shake this thing up? And then Jack Besh also talked with media today. And, he's one of those many players that are kind of X factors because he can play in a lot of different spots. He alluded to that, and kind of said without saying that they're going to line him up in different spots on the field. So that's coming up next year on Locked On Horned Frogs. Well, if you tuned into yesterday's show, you heard about Nutrafol, and Nutrafol is one of our new sponsors, and they're here to help people, especially men, with hair thinning and hair growth. And this can be one of the toughest things to deal with. Like when you start to lose your hair. I shared a story of a few months ago. I suddenly look up one day in the mirror and I got a huge bald spot. It turned out to be like a mild autoimmune thing, and I worked with a dermatologist to get it solved. But it was really crazy to me, like how self-conscious I ended up being about my hair loss. And so you want to make sure that if you're going to use a product, that you're using one that's safe for you, that's going to take care of you and get what you want from a hair growth perspective. And so you don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health, because Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. There's no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. A lot of men think losing their hair is inevitable, but you can take control of your future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. 80% of men will experience hair thinning in their lifetime. That's a huge percentage, but it doesn't have to be your fate. You can get ahead of it with Nutrafol. If you're tired of weakening or thinning hair, or if you want to reach your full potential, the leading hair growth supplement, Nutrafol, helps improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and scalp coverage. They're the #1 dermatologist recommended supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth and scalp coverage. And they use a physician-formulated, natural science-backed ingredients, drug-free technology that provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your health. Go to Nutrafoil.com/men to take their health wellness quiz. And if you use this promo code Locked On College, you can get $10 off your first month subscription and shipping. So again, down at the bottom there, shop at Nutrafol.com/men, and then use that promo code Locked On College for $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping. And we are proud that they are part of the Locked On Network. So open the show today talking about all the players that TCU is replacing this upcoming season. On the offensive line specifically, there's a lot of players across the roster, obviously, but on the offensive line, it's mainly in the interior. And, how are you going to attack that? How have they attacked that in the offseason? Will they go get Colton Deary, the lineman from Maryland, who will be a sophomore this season and was a highly rated guy coming out of high school, a wrestler in high school. They're excited about his potential at the center position. Also went and got Willis Patrick, huge player from a size perspective, from Jackson State. And he should slide into one of those guard spots. And then it's kind of been, up in the air what's going to happen out of their guard spot. John Lands played a lot of snaps last year. He was switching in and rotating in and out with Wes Harris at one of the guard positions last season. And so he has experience along this offensive line. But one thing that they've been sort of tinkering with this offseason, and Najer talked about it today, is Brandon Coleman and Andrew Coker were your two starting tackles last year. And overall, they did a good job. I mean, those were the two weaker spots of the offensive line, but it was a really strong O-line across the board. And overall, those guys did a really fantastic job manning those edge positions and making sure that rushers weren't coming free. Well, Coleman is now spend some time sliding inside, at least in practice. And, they asked him today, like, is this what you want moving forward? They've had Coleman and Coker on the same side, and then Michael Nichols, who was someone that rotated in and out last season, but then was injured and was out for the year. He's at another tackle spot. And so now you have the potential of, on the interior, you have Brandon Coleman, Colton Deary, and then Willis Patrick. And Ricker said, yes, in an ideal world, they would like Brandon Coleman to play that guard position. He stands at 6'6". He weighs 320. And I talked with Brian Smith recently about some of the new recruits that are going to be coming in, hopefully in 2024, depending on what happens as we live to signing day. Some of the new O-line commitments, though, and kind of position flex and where do they fit, and how do you determine, who's inside and who's outside. And there's different factors, but the main thing is typically those inside guys are bigger, maybe a little stronger, but guys that don't have to necessarily worry about kicking those legs back, getting in a pass pro set all the time. You're having pass protection, but that pressure is coming from the interior. You're not having to worry as much about quick and athletic edge players running past you or dipping that shoulder down, getting around you, trying to bull rush you, those kind of things. And so they like the idea of Coleman playing at the guard, and they ask if all this kind of hinged on Michael Nichols at the tackle spot, and he wouldn't say that. He said it's really a couple different players. But I mean, I think when it comes down to it, like if Nichols can stay healthy and he can play tackle at a high level, then that gives them the confidence to have Coleman at guard. And if he can't, well, then they're probably going to have to switch around and put Coker and Coleman back on the outside and have that combination there. And if that happens, it's not necessarily the end of the world. Because if John Lands gets healthy, which his health is still kind of a question mark, then he could play one of those guard spots. Not sure where they are with Garrett Hayes. He started spring camp on the D-line, then flipped back over to the O-line. He's kind of been in and out with the 2s and 3s throughout fall camp. But he's another guy that could play on the interior. So they have some options. But with O-line, you want to get the best 5 guys on the field. And the positions matter, but if you can slide players around on the interior and outside of the offensive line, then that's a big advantage, because the main thing you want is you just want to make sure you have your 5 best players on the field, and then those guys gel and develop as the season goes on and find ways to be effective, and you sort of go from there. But that is one of the big kind of questions or moving parts here is if Coleman's able to slide inside, how much better does that make you on the interior? Because that's where you're losing all your starts and your production from last season. Another guy that he mentioned that has reportedly had a really good fall camp is Ben Taylor Whitfield, true freshman out of Duncanville. Good size, 6'6", 325 pounds. And Coach Ricker says they like what he's doing. He wasn't going to brag on him too much, because he went on to say sometimes I brag on these guys and they show up to practice the next day and they're not as motivated, but you can tell he likes what Whitfield is bringing to the table. And he said he's a guy that he's had to kick out of the facility frequently because he just is so hungry to learn and develop. And Ben was a 3-star player coming out of high school, but he started at Duncanville for a few seasons. And Duncanville is one of the best programs in the state of Texas. And so he's competed at a high level, both inside that program and then with the, teams that they play on a yearly basis. I think he'll be ready to rock. And Tanner McKinney asked me recently, like linemen that could contribute immediately that are freshmen. And honestly, it's pretty rare. We see it more on the D-line now. Dominic Williams did it last year. It seems like Marcus Deal at nose tackle could be someone who plays a lot this year, or at least gets a good number of snaps. But Ben Taylor Whitfield might be a name to know, because it sounds like they're super impressed with what he brings to the table. Need to take a break. When we come back, I'll talk a little more about Jack Besh. And then TCU had a few players on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. And so we'll close with that here on Locked On Horned Frogs. Yeah, so Jack Besh spoke today as well, and he's the LSU transfer, was an inside receiver / kind of tight end H-back type at LSU, freshman All-American, didn't play as much in 2022, but is here and has immediate eligibility, missed spring camp, and they asked him about like where they're moving him around, and he said that he's played in different spots in the formation, didn't want to talk much more about it than that. They want to, keep that a surprise, but that's a name to know. Like, I don't know exactly where he'll be. He'll be in the slot some, and he discussed that, but not sure if they'll put him on the end of the line as a tight end or where they'll find ways to get him the football. But he's an athlete. He's a special talent, and so they'll definitely find a way to get the ball in his hands. We know that much. And, yeah, just another piece to this offense, right? There's so many different guys that I think could step up. It's just a matter of, are you going to find a way to get them the ball, and how good they can they be at consistently catching the ball, making plays, getting up the field, making things happen once they get the ball in their hands. But I'm excited to see what kind of like mad scientist plan the coaching staff has for Jack, because he is a special talent coming over from LSU, and another one of those players that it's kind of based more on projection than production, but at the same time, he was really effective at his last stop, and so I think he could be a great player for this TCU football team when they take the field early in September against Colorado. Okay, so a couple comments from yesterday's video that I wanted to discuss. I talked at the end about TCU guys in the NFL, pretty much exclusively about the rookie class that was in there, and those guys, how they did in their first preseason action. And I asked the question, like, did I miss anybody? And Tommy Fisher, who is a loyal listener to the show, said Tay Barber did a decent job for the Bucs, and Allen Ali got significant playing time for the Vikings. And he said Jalen Reagor also has the best half of football as well, but he's been in the league for a while. And yeah, Jalen's hadn't really clicked for him, but he's super talented. I hope, this season is where the light bulb goes off and it all comes together. But you're totally right. I missed some of those undrafted free agents. Tay Barber had one catch for 17 yards there in Tampa Bay, and hopefully he gets a good shot to, at least put some good tape together and find a way to be effective in those preseason games. He was super reliable, man. I mean, I've said this before, but it just felt like every time he made a catch that it was a big one. And throughout his career was just a consistent force. And I was super excited the way he kind of emerged last season, had that big touchdown catch against Michigan in the playoff game. And he was one of those guys that there were so many players last year that it was just nice to see them get rewarded for what's been a lot of hard work. And honestly, early in their careers at TCU, not a ton of rewards, but they finally kind of reaped a real big harvest last season with all the success that they had on the field. And Allen Ali there in Minnesota, I know he's made some waves. I need to check in with Luke Braun, our Locked On Vikings host, to see how he's doing. I've seen him talk about Ali from time to time as someone who's making things happen in practice. And he was a great center for this team coming over from SMU, like one of those unheralded players that just did his job and did it at a really high level. And so I'm happy to see that he got some snaps and got some playing time in that first preseason game there for Minnesota. Okay, so before we go today, Bruce Feldman puts together this list every year, and he calls it the Freaks list. And so it's basically like it's a collection of the best athletes in college football. And it's ranked, he now does 100. So he's got 100 players on this list. And it's not the best players in college football. Now, obviously, you're talking about the best athletes, so in a lot of cases it correlates to some of the best players in college football. But it's more just about pure athleticism. And one thing that I appreciate about the way Bruce does this is he really makes a search. I mean, there's some guys, there's a guy from Holy Cross on here, there's a guy from Harvard on here. It truly is a list about all of college football. It's not just, okay, we show up to the Ann Arbor weight room and talk about all the guys at Michigan that can do special things. But there were 3 TCU players that made this list, and I was going to highlight them here. First was Savion Williams. He came in at number 56. And Bruce mentioned that Quentin Johnson on the list last year. Savion says that he's faster than Quentin. He went on to say he's got the jump, and I'll give him that. But Williams jumps well, too. He hit 10.6 in the broad jump and posted a 40-inch vertical. And he's also has a great arm. Apparently, the former high school quarterback has incredible arm strength. Chandler Morris said he threw it about 20 yards further when they just had like an arm strength competition. It was like every bit of 80 yards with no warm-up. And I just said that's straight God-given, which Savion Williams throwing a football 80 yards is insane. It's crazy like how gifted these guys are just every year and how good they are at what they do. But I did find that interesting about the fact that he is faster than Quentin. And Quentin's not necessarily a burner, but he's got those long strides, right? And Savion's built kind of the same way. I would have guessed that Quentin was faster, though, and that actually Savion had the better jumping ability because Q can definitely go up and get the football, but I think Savion is more of like your prototypical big body, like I'm just going to go up and over you And yeah, I'm excited to see how they use his skills though this upcoming season. But big time athlete, and hopefully he can put it all together this year in an expanded role as kind of, potentially the undisputed wide receiver one if he can make it happen. At 61, Brandon Coleman, 6'6", 320. We talked about him earlier. Interesting story. He grew up in Berlin but moved back to the U.S. in 2016. Was not ranked. TCU did a great job finding him on the recruiting trail. But he has a 35-inch vertical jump, runs 18 miles per hour. He squats 1,600 pounds, benches 400, and power cleans 375. Man, I'll tell you what, like the days of just big, round offensive linemen that can't move are gone. Like these O-linemen are true athletes. And these strength and conditioning programs now, they find ways to get these guys, to a place where even at their size and build, they're able to do some special things. And yeah, 18 miles an hour at 320 pounds is pretty special. Like that's a guy that's moving, has a good vertical jump as well. So an intriguing prospect. And you see with that athleticism, like he can make it happen at tackle, but the coaching staff and AJ Ricker specifically seem to like the fit there at guard if it, comes down to it. And then at 77, Shad Banks. And Shad's a cool story. And Bruce says he might be the only linebacker in Power 5 who is returning kickoffs. He averaged 27 yards on 3 returns last season. 6'1", 250 pounds, former 2-time Junior Olympic national triple jump champion, consistently runs 21 miles per hour, has been clocked at 4.4 in the 40. Didn't talk about his ability to do backflips, but we know that Shad can do that as well. He's a great athlete, and I'm super excited to see him in a more consistent role and more consistent snap count this year because I love what he brings to the linebacker position. That'll do it for Locked On Horned Frogs today. We'll be back again tomorrow. It's your team every day.